while back, I came across this 1800s dictionary of inventions, and it had some really cool stuff that I hadn't really heard before, some interesting perspectives. And one of the main kind of ways that, things you can tell about a time is the dictionary and the words that are there, the words that are added, especially now in the last decade or 20 years. If you were to look at the words added, you'd be like, what, at any other point in time, because they're pathetic, like internet terms and all this crap. But when you go back in time, you can find out things that are pretty interesting, meanings that have traveled through time and ended up in this 1800s book. And I thought it was just pretty cool. So I wanted to share some of them. I'm going to show a lot of pictures from an encyclopedia, so a totally different thing. Dictionary didn't really have any good pics. So I wanted to show an 1800s encyclopedia with some really cool stuff all over the place. And I'm going to deal with a few words you can see from the title of this, but it has a lot of implications and a lot of interesting things surrounding each one of these words and these definitions. So here we go. Enjoy. First one is going to be alchemy. The origin and antiquity of this science are much controverted. If regard may be had to legend and tradition, it must be as old as the flood, but in effect not one of the ancient poets, philosophers, or chemists make mention of it. It is first noticed by the Empress Eudocia in her Greek dictionary, wherein she observes as follows concerning the famous golden fleece. Dionysius the Mytilenean says that a man whose name was Crius, which signifies a ram, was a pedagogue of Phrixus, in that the sheepskin had a golden fleece, not conformable to poetic assertion, but that it was a book written in skins, containing the manner in which gold ought to be made according to the chymic art. This Dionysius lived sometime prior to Cicero. Manetho, who lived in the time of Ptolemy Philadelphus, also states in his fourth book of Apotites Matica that Venus, in conjunction with Phaeton, the sun, points out makers of gold and workers of Indian ivory. Alchemy seems to have been first regularly studied some short time prior to the Christian era, and to have been known to the Romans, as both Caesar and Diocletian directed all books which treated upon the subject to be burned, and banished such as practiced the art. Though the word itself can be only traced to the time of Constantine, in whose reign Julius Firmicus Maternus, speaking of the influence of the heavenly bodies, affirms in his Mathesis that if the moon be in the house of Saturn at the time a child is born, he shall be skilled in alchemy. The art was much practiced in Greece in the time of Zosimus and Panoplite, who lived about the commencement of the 5th century, and wrote an express treatise on this subject, which he entitled The Divine Art of Making Gold. Alchemy was introduced into Europe in the 13th century when the learning of the East had been brought hither by the Arabians, and became the favorite pursuit of Albertus Magnus, Roger Bacon, Raymond Lally, and others, not only with the view of changing the baser metals into gold or silver, but also under the expectation of discovering a universal medicine which would cure all disorders and prolong the duration of human existence to an indefinite period, an idea first suggested by Geber, an Arabian, about the middle of the 8th century. The writings of these able men raised the study of alchemy to a degree of credit which it little merited, especially among the ecclesiastics, who possessed at that time almost all the learning of the age, and even a pope, John XX1 21st, was weak enough to assert in his treatise on the art of transmutation that he had himself made 200 ingos of gold of 100 weight each. Reimer, in his Phaedra, first notices the introduction of the art into England. He states that in the reign of Edward IV, a license was granted to one John Misselden and his 3 servants to work in the philosophical art of transubstantiating imperfect metals into pure gold and silver, as they are found in the mines. Nevertheless, we have had as severe laws against alchemy and multiplying of metals as against coining itself. So that's very interesting because again, all these things get destroyed at certain points in time way back in the day, and we get nothing now. We get the scraps of what's left in this modern time, hundreds of years later, even thousands in some case. And again, this lends to the Arabian theory that Arabians created a lot of the science, a lot of the invention, a lot of the machines, a lot of the amazingness that inevitably became known as the Renaissance and the Romans and all that, who were burning all this stuff and trying to claim it as their own and making their Freemasons and their new cult leaders the people in charge of creating these inventions and rewriting history to a bunch of lies that we now believe and are taught. So I'm going to keep it going. This next one is pretty cool. I've never heard of this word. It's Aeolipile. It's a hydraulic instrument which, being filled with water and exposed to the fire, produces a strong blast of wind. This instrument is mentioned by Vitruvius, Descartes, and others, and an Aelipole of great antiquity made of brass was lately dug up in the site of Basingstoke Canal and presented to the Antiquarian Society of London. I wonder if that's still there. It is in the form of a grotesque human figure, and the blast proceeds from its mouth. Dr. Platt gives an instance where the Aelipole is actually used to blow the fire. The Lord of the Manor of Essington is bound by his tenure to drive a goose every New Year's Day 3 times around the hall of the Lord of Hinton, while Jack of Hilton, a brazen figure formerly a Saxon idol, having the structure of an Aelipole, blows the fire. Very interesting. Another one I thought was cool. Aeolus's harp, Aeolus's harp, an instrument producing agreeable sounds on being exposed to a current of air. Thomson, in a note to his celebrated ode on this instrument, ascribes the invention of it to Mr. Oswald, but it appears to have been known to Kircher, Athenaeus, and described by him in a book entitled Magia Phonotatia et Phonergia. Interesting. Kirchner's always got some good stuff. That guy dug deep. Another word from the same page is era, A-E-R-A. I thought this was cool too. The word, it is said, was first made use by the Spaniards to denote the period they became subject to the Roman Empire under Augustus. The letters A, E-R-A, signifying the words Annus Erat Augusti. The following are the principal eras of epochas noticed in history. That's pretty interesting. The Julian period, which has been adopted by modern chronologers and from which all eras and epochas are deduced, was invented by Joseph Justus Scaliger, an Italian and professor of the Belles Lettres in the University of Leyden in 1593. It is so called from its being composed of a series of 7,980 Julian years, arising by the multiplication of the cycles of the moon, the sun, and indiction into one another in the year in which our Savior was born. Very interesting. So that's, again, I'll try to find the link and include this below so you can check out this dictionary, but this just has a bombarding of ancient knowledge in it and a bunch of different things. I had one section on clocks, but I'm going to save that for an astronomical clocks video and go right into electricity. Electricity in this dictionary says, this word is derived from electron, the Greek for amber, that being the first substance in which the existence of an electric fluid capable of being excited and accumulated was observed by Thales of Miletus, who flourished 600 years before Christ. Electricity, however, considered as a science, is but of modern origin, supposedly. William Gilbert, a physician in London in the year 1600, being the earliest writer on the subject, he enumerates many substances such as precious stones, glass, and wax as possessing attractive properties when excited by friction. Boyle, about the year 1670, first discovered that a diamond, when rubbed with any kind of stuff, was not only electrical but also emitted light in a dark room. Hawksby, in 1709, mentions the great electric power of glass, the light proceeding from it, and the noise occasioned by it, together with a variety of phenomena relating to electrical attraction and repulsion. The first electrical machine was a globe of sulfur, constructed by the celebrated Otto de Guericke, Council of Magdeburg, about the year 1660. Glass cylinders were shortly afterwards discovered to be much more powerful, but the only rubber for a long time was the dry hand of the experimenter, till Mr. Winkler of Leipzig, in 1750, introduced the cushion, to which a silk flap was added with an amalgam to increase the effect of friction. About the year 1734, Stephen Gray discovered that on suspending pieces of metal on silken lines or attached to glass and electrifying them, they gave sparks, which was the origin of metallic conductors. The accumulation of the electric power by means of coated jars was accidentally discovered by M. von Kleist, Dean of the Cathedral in Common, in 1745. An experiment of a similar kind, though under improved circumstances, was afterwards made at Leyden by Mr. Cuneus, which being attended with success procured for it the name of Leyden File. Mr. Grauth, a German electrician, contrived a plan to increase the strength of the shock by altering the shape and size of the file, and also by charging several files at the same time, so as to form what is now called the electrical battery. The discovery of the identity of lightning with the electric fire was made by Franklin, and to him we owe the practical application of this discovery in securing buildings from the damage of lightning by the erection of metalline conductors. For although the fact of the power of points to attract the electric fluid from a great distance was not unknown to the ancients, yet it had long sunk into oblivion. Electricity was first applied to medical purposes by Krapsenstein at Halle in 1744. Very interesting how they already, they know that this stuff was discovered a long time ago. And Franklin, to think that Franklin was the first one to harness lightning is just foolish. It's as foolish as thinking that Columbus was the first one to take a boat to America. It's just pathetic. There's so many different Egyptian tombs and different monuments that have these different nodes in them, these lights that came on supposedly when people went in the room. So they've had electricity, they've had power, they've had light, artificial light, and all this different stuff for so long. It just keeps getting lost. Every time someone wants to seize power of the people, what would you take first? Probably the water, the food, the electricity, the power. Same thing happening now. What are they doing? They're cutting our oil, they're cutting our power, they're doing all that stuff. Some things never change. Who know the next round will be after they get their green reset? Everyone will be using solar, and they'll be completely shunning electricity or any other power that we've come across. Fossil fuels, blah, they will be written out of history if we let these forces of crap continue. All right, here we go. I thought this one was pretty interesting too. This was called just the word name. This is the definition for the word name. Here we go. Camden supposes that the names formerly given to persons were significative of some qualities of virtues they possessed, or their parents fondly happed they might acquire, and that to imagine names were given without any meaning would be a reproach to our ancestors. Accordingly, we find that Adam gave the name of Eve to his wife, because she was to be the mother of all mankind, and Porphyry remarks that the names of the ancients were very emphatical and concise. Originally, every person had but one name, which by most nations was given within a few days after the birth. But in order to prevent the multiplication of names and to mark the distinction between people bearing the same name, it soon became necessary to add to it the name of the father, and hence the introduction of family or surnames. Thus, among the Hebrews, Caleb is distinguished as the son of Jephthah, and Joshua is the son of Nun, and among the Greeks, Achilles as the son of Peleus. The first trace of surnames in history, unconnected with relationships, occurs in the treaty between the Romans and Sabines, whereby, in order to consolidate the union between the two nations, it was stipulated that the Romans should add to their own names a Sabine name, and the Sabines should in like manner adopt a Roman name, which were to be considered in future as their family or hereditary names. The Romans also were accustomed to assume new names in order to perpetuate the memory of some remarkable action or event. Thus Scipio took the name of Africanus, and these different kind of names were distinguished by them under the terms of nomen, cognomen, and agnomen, kind of like nomenclature. Very interesting. The ancient Britons, according to Camden, generally took their names from colors, but these names are now lost or remain hid among the Welsh. When subdued by the Romans, they began to adopt the Roman names, some of which, though very corrupted, still remain. The Saxons introduced the German names of Edward, Oswald, etc., and the Danes their Harold, Sweyn, etc. Soon after the introduction of Christianity, many assumed Hebrew names as Matthew, Mark, Paul, John, David, Peter, etc., and on the conquest other German names such as William, Robert, Richard, Henry, Hugh were introduced by the Normans. The ancient Britons, like the Hebrews, added the family to the personal name by the adjunctive noun, thus Evan A.P. Rice, or Evan the son of Rice, which in process of time was corrupted to Evan Price. The Irish and Scots by the word Mac, as Donald MacNeil, the Normans by German word Fitz, as John Fitzwilliam, and the English by the word son, as John, son of Richard, or John Richard's son, which in course of time was converted to the surname of Richardson. The Normans introduced the Roman custom of distinguishing their kings and some of their nobles by an agnomen instead of their family name. Thus Edward was called Ironside from his strength, and William II Rufus from the red color of his hair. And in the time of Edward II we meet with Adam de Grey, Adam lord or owner of the estate of Grey. So Robert de Oily corrupted to Robert D'Oyly, It is from this alteration of names in early times that many families who have neglected to keep up their pedigrees are at a loss. A loss to history. Very interesting. Again, just names. Again, just so much less than now. Now it's just like, oh, who's a celebrity this year? I'm gonna name him after them. Or what's a random word? Tree. Let me name a kid Tree. You never really know nowadays. And then being an artist, I had to tell this definition. This one says pens. Reeds cut in the same manner as our pens are of great antiquity. In India, the lower classes and children write with sharp-pointed instruments on the leaves of various plants. Both of these methods were common to the Romans. Pens made from quills are noticed by Isidore, who died in 636. Mabillon mentions a manuscript of the Gospels written in the 9th century, in which the evangelists were represented with quills in their hands, which quills were called by the ancient authors kalami, and it is probable that this word was employed by older writers than Isidore to signify writing pens, where, for want of other proofs, we understand reeds. Interesting. Pentagraph, this instrument for facilitating the copying of plans or prints in any proportion, was invented in 1770. Also very nice, very interesting. You never know what you'll find in any of these ancient books. I absolutely love them, especially the dictionaries. There's a lot of other cool words that were in this book that I might have to check out later on, but you should all definitely check out. I recommend it. The last word I'll talk about today is steam, because we're kind of dealing with power and all different kinds of things like that. So I found this very interesting because I am convinced they were using steam to power a lot of things. Water, why would you not use steam, water, and fire to produce power? It just seems a lot easier, and it seems infinite in the amount of supply we've got. So here we go, steam. Stewart informs us that Hero the Elder, in his Pneumatica, written about 130 BC, has described two machines, in one of which a rotary motion was produced by the emission of heated air, and a similar motion imparted to the other by the action of vapor arising from boiling water. The first writer in modern times who alludes to the power of steam is Bancus, an Italian, who in his work entitled The Machine, written in 1629, states that he had put into motion the floats or vanes of a small mill by allowing the steam issuing from a large Aelipole, like we said before, to act upon them. The Marquis of Worcester, in his 100 Inventions, published in 1663, informs us that from the accidental circumstance of a cover of a vessel in which he was dressing his food while a prisoner in the Tower, being suddenly driven with great violence up the chimney, he had been induced to try a number of experiments relative to the expansive force of steam, and at length had invented an engine by which it could be made conductive to the public interest in raising water from pits or wells, which engine was afterwards recommended to Louis XIV by Sir Samuel Morland for the purpose of irrigating his grounds at St. Germain's. In 1698, Captain Savary obtained a patent for a new method of clearing coal in other mines of water, and he may justly be considered as the first person who rendered steam applicable to manufacturing purposes. But various important improvements have, since his time, been effected in the construction of steam engines, among which may be numbered the piston and safety valve by Papin in 1710, the separate condenser by Watt in 1765, the double-acting engine by Filk in 1780, and the high-pressure engine for the propelling of carriages on railways by Vivian in 1802. The power of steam was first applied to boats by Hall in 1736 for towing vessels into and out of port, but was not generally employed for the purposes of navigation till the year 1807, when Fulton, an American in connection with Mr. Bell of Glasgow, and with engines of Boulton and Watt's construction, established several steam vessels in North America. These boats answering extremely well, Bell, on his return to Scotland in 1811, built the Comet steamboat of 25 tons, with an engine of 4 horsepower, to navigate the Clyde between Glasgow and the Helensbury Baths, which led to the general introduction of steam vessels in various other parts of the kingdom, but it was not till the year 1818 that they ventured to undertake regular voyages at sea. So again, you got to take everything into account as to who wrote this. I mean, these people are glorifying the Greeks and the Romans, but then if we look at different aspects of history and the erasing and stolen history, you can see that a lot of what we've been told the Greeks and Romans did was done a long time ago by other civilizations and acquired by the Greeks and Romans in one of the first resets, or one of those, probably not the first, but one of the many resets where they changed history and they completely rewrote history. I mean, these people The last video I talked about, one of the CIA Tartars, Tartarian Tales 47, talks about the car being invented in Russia 300 years ago, and that's just a blip in the history, and I've never even heard it before. So how do we know where these things were? These people are only kind of showing what the kingdom knows and what the kingdom wants the people to know. And this is a dictionary again, so this is what is going to be spread to the population. Keep all this in mind. So much rewriting of history, but each one has a little bit of information. It's like now, even the biggest liars on TV still put a tiny bit of truth in there because they almost have to. So it's just, again, you have to change the names, you have to go deeper into time, and you have to envision a world where all these things were possible. Like, to make these pyramids, to make these ancient structures, they had to use steam, they had to use power, they had to use machinery. All that to talk about slaves carrying these monstrous blocks and stuff and building these amazing feats of strength are just absolutely preposterous. It was either giants or it was machines, ethereal devices, energy devices, free energy, just ways, just thinking of smart ways to do things, using nature to help you with your work, using the powers that exist everywhere to help mankind in their process without polluting, without desecrating, without having to pay someone for it. All these kind of free methods of things that were just abundant. Water is everywhere. Fire is easily made. All this stuff is possible and will still be possible and is still possible even though it's eradicated from time. There is still the way to change all of these different things into gold. Change nonsense into gold. Alchemy is still out there. That process has not been eradicated. Unless, maybe there's celestial objects and different things that have been taken, like our weather, have been polluted, all these things. There's no way of telling anything. I just hope this lends a little bit of insight in, because just the more we dig deep, the more we can kind of piece things together and to kind of just get more of a greater glimpse into our imaginative past, because that's the only thing we really can do now until we discover the truth, is imagine. But all these things kind of lead up to a great thing, and we know people are lying, we know when people aren't lying, and we can just gradually continue to piece it together because we have to, and we owe it to the future of humanity to fix this mess, to end this informational lies that's just suppressing humanity as a whole. It has to end. We all need to flourish, and in order to flourish, we need the truth of our past, our present, and our eternal beautifulness. Bless you all.